This is the instructional video for getting started with Unit 2, the Big Bang, which is also Threshold 1. So as always, we start at the Big History Project unit timeline, click into Unit 2. Before we get started, please be sure to read this introductory paragraph. It's always helpful to set sort of the purpose and expectations around what you're going to be learning in this unit. Before we get started on that, however, I want to look at this. I don't believe you have access to this from the student mode, but it is sort of the unit guide, and it starts with a few important bits of information that I think are worth reviewing. So first is the driving question. You'll remember by now that in each unit, in one or two of the lessons within, there is an opportunity to answer or engage in the DQ notebook. That's the driving question notebook. That's why this says driving questions. And it's always to get you thinking about that driving question. And usually you'll start out answering it based on what you know at the beginning, and then answer it again based on what you know at the end. But I will say this. It's always going to be part of your assessment for that unit. So it's important that you do understand the driving question and that you will be responsible for answering that driving question. So the driving question for Unit 2, how and why do individuals change their minds? Okay, you'll explore that in more depth as we go. Learning outcomes. So these are the things that you ought to be able to do at the end of this unit. So let's try and keep them in mind. Explain the basics of the Big Bang Theory and the primary evidence that supports this theory. Using evidence from the text and claim testing, explain why views of the universe have changed over time and the roles that scientists have played in shaping our understanding of the origin of the universe. Number 3, understand how to use claim testing to evaluate a claim or resource. And finally, locate Ptolemy, Copernicus, Galileo, Newton, and Hubble on a timeline and explain what each added to our collective understanding of the structure of the universe. And I'll have this in text as well on the site, but so I won't read this whole thing. But the key concepts here really are understanding how our understanding changes over time. That we might believe one thing at some point, but then over time, through the collection of knowledge and evidence, it changes. And so that's an important concept to understand. Okay, so let's jump into Unit 2. And this week, our focus is on Lesson 2.0, the Big Bang. So we'll click Start Lesson. And as always, I would encourage you to kind of look around at the edges. Here's the lesson outline, which you can use to navigate up and down here. Lesson vocabulary is always there. And again, just remember that along the edges, sometimes there are little bits of information or things that might be helpful or just interesting, tips and such that might be worth looking into. So don't ignore those. I encourage you to read them. Okay, so lesson outcomes. So these are the outcomes that we're hoping for this lesson. Please go ahead and read through those. Identify the raw materials that were created in the Big Bang and explain why they're important. Explain why the Big Bang is the beginning of big history, and explain the basics of the Big Bang Theory. Okay, so first activity is who knows what. And if you click into that, you'll get to the worksheet itself. But again, as always, beforehand, read through all of this stuff, okay? Just get a sense for the purpose and the process. The purpose being, here's what you're going to get out of this resource. And the process is, here's how you should move through the process or through the worksheet. So these are the instructions, really. Okay, so when we click into that, opening who knows what. So again, that same purpose and process. I am going to try not to print out worksheets anymore. So this is why I'm showing you this now, but I know that the worksheets can be a little bit confusing, like why do you have them for some things and not others? So we're going to try to just do everything in our notebooks. So for this particular activity, who knows what? It tells you to think about the event that your teacher presents to you and answer these 4 questions, okay? And the event is the attacks against the US on September 11th, 2001. So that is the event. If you're not watching this video, obviously you're not going to know and you're going to ask me. So be sure and watch this video. Of course, if you just heard that bit of advice, you are watching the video, so it was probably pointless. Nonetheless, that's your job for this activity, who knows what. The next up is vocabulary. One thing I forgot to point out is that in fact, let's just do it real quick. From the main screen, vocabulary, oh shoot, I thought I made this optional. This will list as optional up here before you get to this video, just so you know. So anyway, I just wanted to let you know that vocabulary is optional, but I strongly urge you to at least read through this purpose and process and have a look at the Unit 2 vocabulary. It's really good information, and a lot of this vocabulary, this unit, is a little bit tough. So it's worth getting clear on. Next up is this video, A Big History of Everything, H2, and it's just like a 3-minute clip. And again, before you click play, read through the process, the key ideas, the conceptual thinking, and the summary. And please remember that after you've done that, then you access the resource itself and you make sure that you can answer both the key ideas questions as well as the conceptual thinking questions. The note-taking process, most people are not really kind of getting this, so I'm going to redo the note-taking video there, but I just want to remind you that for every single resource, like in a lesson, you ought to have the title listed and notes below it. And for videos in particular, there are always going to be these key ideas, questions, and conceptual thinking. At least I'm pretty sure there are. And you've got to answer those questions. That is what tells me that you paid attention to that resource. It's only a 3-minute clip, guys. It shouldn't take that much to answer these questions. Okay, so do make sure you're doing that effectively. Next up is a reading. So complexity and thresholds. Purpose, process. In this case, there's also key ideas, conceptual thinking, and summary. So again, read the whole thing. Read like all of this section, then click into the complexity and thresholds text and make sure that in your notes, in your notebook, you have listed complexity and thresholds and that you're taking notes as you read through it and you are answering these questions as well as in the conceptual thinking. That is what the note-taking requirement asks of you. Next up, watch this video, Threshold 1, The Big Bang. Again, it's just a 2-minute clip and a few questions, okay? But as always, write in your notebook, Threshold 1, The Big Bang. Read through the purpose, the process, the key ideas, conceptual thinking, summary. Then watch the video, then come back and answer these questions, okay? Just get into this sort of routine of how we move through this content. All of these this text in the purpose, process, key ideas, etc. It's like a preview. It sets you up for what to expect when you engage in the activity or the video or the text or whatever it is, so that your brain is looking for the main ideas. So be sure to do that. Next up is this threshold today. Again, you'll write that in your notebook. You'll read through purpose and process. And once you click into this threshold today, here's what it looks like. Again, I'm not printing out this worksheet for you, but here's what you are going to do. As you'll see once you read through this, it's asking you to access a number of different sources and create just like a card, these threshold cards. So you're going to list for whatever resources. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. So you should access 4 resources, list the title, the source date, and list the importance of that resource to this threshold being threshold number 1, the Big Bang. And again, this all just goes in your notebook. You don't have to have this printed out separately. It just goes in your notebook. So that's this threshold today. You'll see exactly what it requires as you read through this. And then finally, oh no, we're not quite at finally. I'll tell you what, I'm going to stop this and we'll pick up in part 2.